last face you'll ever see. Prepare to die.
Welcome back, my friends. I've finally returned after what seems like an eternity, and I haven't come back empty-handed. I bring to you a story, an adventure as long and as action-packed as the Odyssey, with as many monsters and curses as Beowulf. One that will see you journey far beyond your reality, taking you into a world of fantasy and strife. An ancient world at the end of an age that stands on a tenuous balance, looking to topple over into chaos at any moment. It's here that fate has ensnared you, sending you on a collision course with the past, putting in your hands the weight that will decide whether the balance tips to justice or tyranny. In truth, uncertainty lies at the bottom of each precipice, but it's up to you to brave the perils that lurk in these dark depths and usher this world into its new dawn. Will you be up to the task, or will you fall victim to the horrors that lie ahead? Well, in 2005, Wargaming Seattle, formerly known as Gas Powered Games, let you find out when they released this title, Dungeon Siege 2. This epic takes place in the fantasy world of Arana, and sees you start as a mercenary in the army of an up-and-coming king of sorts named Valdis. Valdis has rallied an army of orc-like Mordant soldiers, and has sent you and your friend to join this army in making a coastal assault on the Dryad homeland of Greyland. The goal is to work with the forces already there to cut through whatever defenses lie ahead and claim an ancient artifact that's being held in a nearby temple. What begins as a straightforward mission turns, however, as seemingly innocent dryads and elves begin giving their lives to defend what you thought was a meaningless relic. These concerning signs begin to make your friend doubt the cause you've signed up for, but you both are forced to move on regardless. After a long and bloody assault, you and what remains of the army are successful and secure the artifact when Valdis himself arrives. In a shocking move, Valdis turns on his own mercenaries and begins slaughtering them to the last man. Just before his treacherous blade reaches you though, your friend manages to dive in the way and sacrifice himself, saving you but leaving you unconscious in the temple. You awake to find that you've been imprisoned in a Dryad city and are being accused of all manner of heinous acts for aiding in Valdis' foul deeds. It's here, at the lowest of the lows, that your journey begins, and in this 40 to 80 hour epic, you'll have to fight with every last breath to clear your good name and discover the true nature of Valdis' world-shaking plans. The story on offer here actually surprised me, as for an action RPG, I thought it went above and beyond what it needed to. What could have been an extremely generic fantasy world was instead made into one of the most memorable I've seen in a while. The developers seem to take inspiration from the best aspects of worlds like The Lord of the Rings and Warcraft to create a base, but expanded well into their own direction to create a unique atmosphere. Dungeon Siege manages to break away from the simple good versus evil story that fills much of the fantasy genre, and instead incorporates much more morally gray beats and characters along the way. The fact that you essentially start the game working for the villain is a perfect example of this, and shows that it's not simply your average hero's journey. Another aspect I liked was learning about the numerous races and their extensive histories and motivations. Each feels so unique, and the developers masterfully crafted all manner of mystery and intrigue to surround each one. This pushes you to want to understand them more, and the game rewards this by dripping you more and more of the puzzle pieces to get the full picture of each of them by the end. Every one of the races is essentially a character or faction of its own, and within that there are individuals with tons of personality too. Exploring the world, reading the huge list of interesting books, and talking to all of the fully voice-acted NPCs was a joy, and the developers even added additional details, like some of the NPCs responding to the race you picked for your character, adding flavor to what was already a rich world. Top this all off with cutscenes to rival even the work of Blizzard in that era, and you have a truly complete and fulfilling narrative here that I loved. Outside of taking in the story, what you'll spend a majority of your time with is the combat. To start, you'll get to pick and customize one of 5 different races to play with as your character, being the humans, elves, dwarves, dryads, and half-giants. Each of these has their own strengths and weaknesses, leaning towards different playstyles, but none force you down a particular road. The class system here is actually really interesting too, as it's honestly more similar to Bethesda games like Skyrim than most other ARPGs like Diablo or Torchlight. This means that instead of picking a set class at the start, you'll get to experiment with any weapon or combat type you want at any time. As you make use of a specific weapon or magic type, you'll gain experience in its corresponding class and unlock more of the skill tree for it. The 4 base classes you can level to do this are Fighter, Ranger, Combat Mage, and Nature Mage. Fighter is your standard warrior. Ranger is a master of bows, crossbows, and thrown weapons. Combat Mage is a master of fire, lightning, and necromancy related spells, and Nature Mage is a master of ice and healing magic. Within each of these classes, you can also specialize in certain roles and aspects depending on what you want to do. For example, the fighter can spec into being a shield-wielding, heavily armored tank to absorb a majority of the attacks for the party. If you prefer a more offensive role, however, they can also spec into the dual-wielding or two-handed trees to cleave through anything that stands in your way. As you progress through each of these trees, you'll unlock and upgrade a number of powerful spec-specific abilities that will heavily impact the battlefield whenever used. Some of these were real standouts, like the Circle of Frost, which freezes all enemies and impales them on giant spikes of ice, or Detonation, which unleashes a massive fiery explosion on any who dare face you. In addition to these 4 classes, the Broken World expansion also adds 2 mixed classes, being the Blood Assassin and Fist of Stone. Blood Assassin combines combat magic and ranged into a new class, and Fist of Stone combines fighter and nature magic into a class, and they both add tons of new abilities and skill trees to play around with too. With all of these options, you could truly make an unlimited amount of character builds, and when combined with the party system that lets you take up to 3 people or pets with you on your first playthrough, the game becomes a real playground of builds and experiments. Personally, I did happen to think that the magic classes were the most fun here by a good margin though. While the other classes can certainly have their strengths, the magic classes simply outdo them in terms of options for attacks. Instead of equipping a melee or ranged weapon and using that as a primary form of attack, the magic classes get to choose from a huge amount of spells, and mid-combat can swap between them for differing effects. In addition to this, the magic classes also get buffs and summons that can automatically be casted on repeat as well. While you can train your fighter and ranger in some magic, this may not always work in your favor, as a jack of all trades in Dungeon Siege comes out weaker than a focused hero. Luckily, the mixed classes fix some of these issues, however, as they add incentives like powers and buffs that make multi-classing far more viable. I wanted to take a step back though, and touch back on the party system I briefly mentioned, as I believe what truly sets Dungeon Siege apart from most other ARPGs is its party system. There are 2 kinds of party members you could take, being characters or pets. A pet is a beast or a monster that you could purchase that has set abilities and stats. Instead of leveling the pet through combat, you can feed the pet items, potions, and other gear to increase related stats. My preferred option to take along, however, are the characters. Taking notes from classic BioWare titles, Dungeon Siege allows you to grow a party of unique characters and take on each quest with every one of them bringing their own unique perspectives. Throughout your journeys, these characters will comment on things you're doing and banter back and forth with each other, similar to how Dragon Age or Mass Effect games work. On top of that, you also get individual quests for every single character you can bring along that flesh out who they are, and sometimes change their views on the world and events taking place within. This is a real game changer for me, because it manages to combine the best aspects of heavy hitters like Diablo and Dragon Age into a single game, and it really offers something unique that I haven't seen in nearly any other titles. These characters can also be leveled just as your player can, leading to so many possible party combos. I personally loved making glass cannon characters that deal out massive damage, but had to be wary of heavy-hitting enemies. I put more time into this game than any I've covered yet at around 75 hours of playtime, and I literally did not get bored through any of it. That alone should tell you that these developers did something right here. Obviously, in a game as large as this, there's bound to be issues however, and one of these can be the party AI at times. In some moments, your party will act completely brain dead or simply not attack at all, like in this clip here. This is mainly an issue when you set your party to the rampage attack mode, where they function more on their own. Luckily, you can change this so that they mirror your actions more to not have to deal with the issue as much. Outside of this, there were only 3 other gripes I really had with the game. The first one is that your party's dialogue and banter when traveling can be interrupted by combat. For some reason, the devs thought it was a great idea to script the dialogue to seemingly play as you walk into rooms filled with enemies, so this can happen a good amount of times throughout the playthrough. This only really affects minor dialogue and conversations, but it's impossible to reinitiate these moments, so it can be a bit annoying. The next issue I had was the biggest one by far, and can serve as a barrier to entry for some. This game, at least on Steam, pretty much doesn't function in its base form. I actually couldn't get to the main menu on launch, and had to spend hours researching ways to solve this to varying levels of success. It seems that the lack of modern resolution support causes it to bug out when you try and open it, and while I did eventually find workarounds and mods to help alleviate these issues, there was one that I wasn't able to properly overcome. While you can increase the resolution of the game via some methods, the UI doesn't seem to fully scale with it. This means that if you try to set your game to 1440p or 4K, the UI and menus will end up being ridiculously tiny. Supposedly there are ways to solve this, but I never managed to get them to work for me, so I just played the game on 1080p as it seemed to keep a nice balance between UI size and detail of the world. Luckily for you viewers, I compiled a list of every mod and guide I spent hours finding, so the majority of this should be able to be fixed pretty quickly, all things considered. This also includes mods that help fix the interrupted dialogue issue I mentioned earlier, and some graphics enhancing mods I liked too. Finally, the last issue I had was that the DLC for this game and multiplayer functionality is not in the Steam version, and in fact the DLC is not for sale or included with any digital purchase of the game currently. This is pretty big, as the DLC adds the dwarf race, both mixed classes, and a whole 10+ hour campaign that brings a nice conclusion to the world and story. Once again, you're in luck though viewers, as I found workarounds for this too, and I'll leave the links and guides to downloads and how to get the DLC and multiplayer working in the description as well. Alternatively, I believe the GOG version has at least the LAN multiplayer working in its base form, so if you're gonna pick any version to buy, that might be your best bet. All in all, these issues could be annoying at times, but once you get over the initial hurdle of getting the game running, it functions pretty seamlessly all the way to the end. Enough of the negatives though, let's get back to talking about the fun stuff. A huge part of the enjoyment in RPGs, and specifically ARPGs, is getting sick loot drops and rewards of armor, weapons, and new spells to use and upgrade your party with. I'm happy to report that Dungeon Siege is no slouch in this department, featuring hundreds upon hundreds of sets of gear with buffs that support nearly every playstyle imaginable. While I could be wrong, it seems that a lot of the lesser gear is randomized to an extent in terms of what stats it has on it. When you find the rare items, which usually come in purple or gold however, the gear seems to all be unique, and even often in sets that add additional buffs when worn together. Many times, you can find some of the most powerful gear in the game after completing some epic quest, delving into an ancient tomb, or uncovering and fighting some powerful force in the world. This really added to the atmosphere of the game, and gave a true feeling of accomplishment for completing side activities too. On top of that, the game allows you to create your own enchantable gear with all sorts of regents and items you can find in the world or its stores. As you progress, better and better enchantable gear and better enchanting items can be found, which allow you to create some of the most powerful gear in the game. Enchanted gear can honestly seem a bit overpowered at times, as you can stack important stats that your class needs in mass quantities. But this is only really an issue near the end of the game, where resources and gold are so abundant that enchanting becomes more about what you can imagine than what you can afford. The devs actually did add a bit of balance to counter the power of enchanted items as well, in the form of the set bonuses on legendary gear. While a single legendary item may not be better than an enchanted one, when combined with other pieces of the set, they can end up being some of the most powerful items in the game, with bonuses that are hard to beat. All in all, I really enjoyed the variety of weapons and armor in this game, and the grind to constantly upgrade never got old. Just when the game started feeling too easy, enemies and bosses were added that maybe change up my approach to building my characters, as they could exploit weaknesses of mine, like lack of magical resistance, forcing me to move to different gear sets and stat trees to not be obliterated. After the gear, I wanted to focus a little bit on the quests that the game has in it. The base game and DLC have around 36 main quests and 62 side quests, all filled with a pretty varied list of stories and secrets to uncover. The main quest will take you to all corners of the world and see you participate in a number of epic boss battles and set pieces. The side quests are completely optional, but end up being just as memorable as the main quests in many cases too. For this review, I actually beat every single quest in the game, and my takeaway is that Dungeon Siege has an extremely unique approach when it comes to these that's practically non-existent in the modern gaming scene. Some quests span the entirety of the world, requiring you to travel off the beaten path and to truly explore your environments. Hidden switches and secret passageways are prevalent in this game, and reward a keen eye at every turn. Riddles, puzzles, and extremely tough enemies may block your path in some instances, and these can prove to be among the most difficult challenges in the game. Just when you think you're done with the tricks, you may encounter something like a mimic that in all honesty were the most terrifying incarnation I have ever seen in a game. They show up when you least expect it and are insanely powerful, forcing you to pull out all the stops to defeat them. All these additions to the world made it feel alive, and gave you a sense that there's always something new to find no matter how much you play the game. I put 75 hours into this game, and I guarantee I missed a good deal in that process, just based on how massive this world is. Through jungles, beaches, deserts, tundras, caves, cities, and even volcanoes, you'll have so much to explore that you could almost get a lifetime of gameplay out of this title. And through it all, it still masters the little details. Enemies explode into awesome clouds of red mist when hit hard enough, and you can see your character's breath when it gets cold. You can even leave footsteps when walking in the sand and snow on top of all that. When exploring this vast world, there are literally almost no loading screens to speak of as well. I'm telling you folks, this game is truly an achievement on a number of levels, and even upon completion, you get more content, as after you finish, you also unlock harder and harder difficulties, and the ability to add more members to your party, increasing the replayability that much more. Throw onto that the soundtrack made by Jeremy Soule, the creator of music behind many of the most legendary titles of all time, like The Elder Scrolls, and you have an RPG to rival the greatest of the greats. A few of my favorite songs in the track were The Siege of Graylin Beach, the Elf Town music in the expansion, and Rhythms of Darkness, but in reality, the whole soundtrack is great and adds hugely to the atmosphere of the world. Lastly, I'll focus on the DLC and some additional elements it brings to the experience. For one, many of the voice actors seem to be improved for the DLC, which was a welcome change. Most of the voice acting in the game is perfectly fine, and a few characters even stand out, like Princess Eva, who sounded like an absolute badass. Others, however, can for sure sound a bit campy at times, which makes it understandable that they changed them. The new actors and lines bring an additional weight and gravitas to the roles that only serves to further make the world more believable. In addition, the developers added creatures with new types of attacks and abilities that weren't seen in the base game. Enemies in the expansion may put up spell-reflecting shields or shoot out dodgeable AoE attacks to keep you on your toes at all times. These enemies also have motivations and backstories that take a much darker and more morally ambiguous tone than the base game. Choices you make and quests you can choose to complete can be downright evil at times, and factions that were once viewed as the good guys can get new dimensions to themselves, making you less sure about whether you should place your trust in them at all. All in all, the expansion will last you around 10 hours, and I highly recommend you add it to your game if you end up playing, as it really completes the experience. As I said earlier, I'll leave links in the description on how to download and get the DLC and extra content working. You know folks, before deciding on this game, I tried a bunch of other RPGs, and none really gripped me in the way I wanted. I'd almost given up hope on picking a game in the genre, when in a stroke of luck, I stumbled back upon this very gem that had been sitting in my Steam library for years untouched. What a find it was, as I got stuck into this in the way you only really can with the best of the best RPGs. I highly recommend any fan of the genre to try out this game, and even newcomers to ARPGs may find this far more accessible and modernized than many more well-known titles in the genre. Dungeon Siege 2 is a true epic of the gaming industry, and is severely underappreciated today. If you're looking for your next gaming fix, look no further than this game here. For all these reasons and more, I'm giving Dungeon Siege 2 a 9 out of 10.